Hello there. Welcome. You've clicked on what might be the most boring video on the entire internet. And that's not an insult. It's a promise. Because tonight you don't need noise. You don't need another fast-talking video. You don't need flashing edits or catchy titles. You need stillness. You need silence. You need slow. And maybe you need a little boredom. So settle in. Get comfortable. Close every other tab. And just listen. This is your moment. A moment where there's nothing to do, nowhere to be, and no one to impress. Just you, this video, and a long, winding, uneventful story that goes absolutely nowhere. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below. I'd love to see just how far this boredom travels. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Not because anything exciting will happen, but because sometimes you need a place to come back to when your mind is too loud and your world is too fast. Now take a deep breath with me. In through the nose, hold, and out through the mouth. Let's begin. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story. A story about a man named Charles. Charles was exceptionally average. He lived in a town with a population of 1,202. No more, no less. They had one post office, 2 bakeries, and 3 cats that didn't belong to anyone. Charles worked at the Department of Office Supplies, specifically in the Division of Stapler Inventory and Paperclip Management. Every morning, he arrived at 8:58 a.m., never late, never early, just precisely on time. He wore the same thing every day: beige pants, a light gray button-up shirt, and a navy blue tie with a single, barely visible coffee stain from 2006. He didn't bother washing it out anymore. It was part of the routine. At 9:01 a.m., he'd log into his computer. His password, Paperclip 123. No one ever tried to guess it. By 9:07, he was sorting the weekly shipment of medium-sized binder clips. Not the small ones, not the jumbo ones, just medium, because balance, Charles believed, was the foundation of a meaningful life. At 10:12 a.m., Charles took his first break. He would stand exactly 7 feet from the coffee machine, sip decaf, and stare at the wall where a motivational poster read, "Teamwork makes the dream work." He had once considered changing the font, but decided the Helvetica was good enough. That was Charles. Steady, unmoving, utterly dull. But in that dullness, there was a kind of peace.
No chaos, no surprises.
Just rhythm. Predictable, soothing rhythm. Now imagine his lunch. Every single day, 1 ham sandwich.
No lettuce, no tomato.
Just ham, a thin layer of mayonnaise, and exactly 3 pickle slices. He once used 4. Didn't like it. Felt unbalanced. At 12:32 p.m., he ate in silence. Never at 12:31. That was too soon. And 12:33 felt risky. You see, Charles believed in margins. Margins of time. Margins of space. Margins of mayonnaise. His coworkers never quite understood him, but they respected him. Because Charles never forgot a birthday, always returned borrowed pens, and never, ever took the last donut from the break room. He was, in every way, utterly, wonderfully uneventful. And as you listen, maybe you can feel it, your heart slowing just a little, your mind softening around the edges, your breath finding its own quiet rhythm. That's what boredom does. It opens up space for stillness, for pause, for peace. Charles once attended a seminar on workplace optimization. He brought a notebook. He didn't take notes. Instead, he drew a single rectangle and labeled it "My Desk." Then he drew a smaller rectangle inside it and labeled it "My Mouse Pad." And inside that, he drew one final rectangle labeled "My Stapler." 3 rectangles, one inside the other, perfectly centered. He smiled at the drawing, felt complete. The speaker asked the audience for one word to define their work purpose. People said things like impact, innovation, growth. Charles said stability. No one clapped, but Charles didn't need applause. He just needed to return home on time, feed his fish, named Gerald, and read a book about the history of pencils. Yes, pencils. His favorite was the Dixon Ticonderoga No. 2. Not too hard, not too soft, just right. Much like Charles, just right. Charles had a neighbor named Edna. Edna was 73 years old and had a passion for knitting doilies. Not scarves, not sweaters, just doilies. She had over 47 of them, each one labeled and stored in transparent plastic zip bags, filed alphabetically: Autumn Breeze, Blue Mist, Crimson Whisper, and one simply called Doily No. 14. Charles once asked her, "Why don't you name them all?" And she replied, "Sometimes a doily just wants to be a doily." Charles nodded. That made sense to him. Every second Thursday of the month, Edna would bring Charles a lukewarm glass of chamomile tea. No sugar, no lemon, just tea. Charles would sip it slowly, 3 sips every 5 minutes, and then thank her with the same exact words every time. That was quietly refreshing, and Edna would smile. Then she'd return home to knit another doily under the sound of her ticking grandfather clock. Tick, 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 the kind of ticking that doesn't hurry, doesn't slow, just stays the same, like time itself had forgotten how to rush. Charles liked clocks. He owned 6 of them. Not because he needed them, his routine was already precise, but because he liked the way each one ticked a little differently. There was the kitchen clock, an analog, olive green circle with black hands that sometimes wobbled. The bathroom clock was shaped like a seashell. It was always 2 minutes fast. Charles never corrected it. It gave him a sense of readiness. The bedroom clock had a soft red glow. Not too bright, not too dim, just the perfect amount of glow to see the time without feeling watched. He had one digital clock in the hallway, just to balance things out. The numbers changed with a soft click. Click, click, click. He never missed those clicks. They gave the hallway life. You're probably feeling a little sleepy now. If you're not, that's okay. We're just getting started. Let yourself drift with Charles. Let yourself get bored. Beautifully, blissfully bored. Now, Charles had a favorite walk. It was the path behind his building, past the metal dumpster, next to the overgrown hedge, and through the gap in the old chain-link fence. That fence had a bent corner that made a little ping sound when the wind blew right. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. Just a soft, metallic ping, like a triangle in an orchestra that forgot what song it was playing. Through the fence, there was a gravel path. Gray stones, white stones, occasionally one with a slight pink hue. Charles didn't walk quickly. He didn't stroll. He simply moved, with purpose but without rush. Every 10 steps he paused, to look at a tree, to notice a bird, or just to take in the quiet. The birds never sang. They just existed. Feathers fluffed, eyes calm, balanced on branches that never broke. There was one bench on the path. Old, wooden, a little crooked. Charles loved that bench. Not because it was comfortable, it wasn't. Not because it had a view, it faced a small bush. But because it never changed. It had a slight creak when you sat on it. The kind of creak that sounded like a yawn from an old friend. He would sit there, sometimes for 7 minutes, sometimes for 8, never 9. 9 felt excessive. He would think about absolutely nothing. He wouldn't plan or strategize or reminisce. He would just sit, maybe breathe, maybe blink, maybe do both at the same time. Then he'd stand, brush off the imaginary dust from his beige pants, and walk back. His footsteps would crunch lightly against the gravel. Crunch, 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 like someone slowly chewing dry cereal in another room. Back home, Charles had a collection of pens. They weren't fancy, just regular ballpoint pens. But he organized them by ink color, barrel width, and cap tightness. His favorite was a blue pen, with a slightly loose cap, and a tiny scratch along the side. He never wrote with it. It was just for holding. Some nights, he'd hold it for up to 11 minutes. No writing, just holding. And when he finally put it down, he always placed it in the same direction, tip pointing left, label facing up. Now you might wonder, was Charles bored? No, not really. Because Charles had mastered something we often forget in our fast world. He had mastered the art of nothing, not doing, not achieving, just being. And in that stillness, in that quiet, there was rest, there was peace. And right now, as you listen, you can let yourself drift there too. Let your body sink into whatever it's lying on. Let your eyes feel heavier. Let your breath soften. Let the world fade, like a bench facing a bush that doesn't need a view to feel complete. Some evenings, Charles would prepare a snack, not because he was hungry, but because there was something deeply satisfying about preparation. His favorite snack? One slice of plain white bread, toasted to a light golden brown, not too crisp, just enough so the edges whispered crunch when bitten. He didn't put butter on it, or jam, or anything really, just toast. He'd cut it in half, diagonally, not vertically, not horizontally, diagonally. That small triangle shape made it feel intentional. He would place each piece on a white ceramic plate.
No patterns, no designs.
Just white. Then he'd carry the plate with both hands to the living room and place it on the coffee table, exactly 1 inch from the corner. He never measured, but somehow it was always the same. Then he would sit, and he would wait, not for anything, just for a few minutes, to appreciate the toast, before eating it. First bite, top corner, small, slow. He chewed exactly 14 times per bite. Once he tried 15. Felt unnecessary. After finishing the first triangle, he would pause, sip some room temperature water from a glass that had a tiny chip on the base. He liked that chip. It gave the glass character. Then he'd move on to the second triangle, even slower, even quieter. And when the plate was empty, he wouldn't rush to clear it. He would let it sit for exactly 6 minutes. 6, not 5, not 7. That was snack time. Sometimes he would listen to the refrigerator hum, that soft, low, droning sound, a sound so constant that most people stopped hearing it. But Charles heard it. It was like a quiet engine of life, buzzing beneath the silence, telling him, I'm here. I'm keeping things cold. He appreciated that. At 9:13 p.m., he would brush his teeth. Always the same toothpaste, mint, but not too strong. He didn't like the ones that felt like a mouthful of fire. He would brush for 2 minutes and 15 seconds. He set a timer. It wasn't about hygiene. It was about consistency. Left side, right side, top, bottom, tongue, done. He rinsed twice, then gently dabbed the edges of his mouth with a towel that was soft, but slightly frayed. It had a small embroidered duck in the corner, a gift from Edna. He never asked why she chose a duck. At 9:19, he would return to the living room, turn on the floor lamp, the one with the frosted glass shade. He'd open a book, not a novel, not something thrilling, usually a manual or a catalog. One time, he read a 76-page booklet about ceiling fan installation. He didn't own a ceiling fan. He just liked the diagrams. He especially liked the section titled, Step 4A, Confirm Wiring Ground is Secure. Something about that line felt deeply responsible. Another night, he read the full history of elevator buttons. Did you know that most elevator buttons used to be mechanical, but now many are capacitive? Charles did. He highlighted that fact in light gray pencil, not yellow highlighter. That would have been too bold. After reading, Charles would close the book slowly and place it back on the shelf, exactly where it came from. His bookshelf had 5 shelves, each labeled not by genre, but by emotional tone. Shelf 1, mildly interesting. Shelf 2, reasonably useful. Shelf 3, technically important. Shelf 4, functionally boring. Shelf 5, quietly reassuring. Books never moved shelves, even when they deserved to, because, and now, as the night wraps itself around the world like a warm, invisible blanket, Charles sleeps. Not a dramatic sleep, not a deep, dream-filled escape, just sleep, soft, steady, still. In the quiet of his modest bedroom, the red glow of the bedside clock flickers gently. 10:01 p.m. Exactly. Outside, a streetlight hums. Not brightly, not loudly, just existing, like the quiet breath of a town that doesn't need to be known. And inside that town, in that plain apartment, a man named Charles dreams about nothing in particular. Sometimes he dreams of sorting paper clips. Sometimes of the way toast smells when it's just barely golden. Sometimes it's just a soft field of beige, like the color of his pants. And that's enough. He doesn't dream of adventures, or wild possibilities, or the places he'll go. He dreams of the stillness he already lives in. He dreams of balance, of routine, of doilies and ducks and mildly creaking benches. And somewhere, in a world that never stops rushing, never stops scrolling, never stops wanting, Charles has found a pocket of peace. And maybe, just maybe, that peace has found you too, because you're still here, still listening, still breathing, and now you've slowed down enough to hear the sound beneath the silence. Maybe you're lying on your side now, or tucked under a blanket, your body heavy, your thoughts soft, your eyes half closed. That's good. That's what this was for. No plot, no point, no performance, just a quiet descent into a space where nothing happens. And in that nothing, there is room to rest. So let go. Let go of the to-do lists, the open tabs, the spinning thoughts, the expectations. Let it all blur out. There's no rush, no finish line, no next scene. Only this moment, only this breath, And before we fade out entirely, if you're still barely awake, just enough to move a finger, to reach for your screen, I'd love if you could do two small things. First, tell me where you're watching from. I read every single country in the comments, from sleepy towns to busy cities. This channel brings them all together. Second, tap the subscribe button, not because this was exciting, but because sometimes you need a quiet corner of the internet, where nothing is demanded of you, where you can just exist and be. That's what we're building here, a sanctuary of slowness, a rhythm for the restless, a place where you don't have to chase anything to be enough. So if that sounds like somewhere you'd want to return to, subscribe and come back anytime your mind feels too full. We'll be here, waiting quietly. And now, no more words, just the sound of your breath, the weight of your limbs, and the pull of sleep. Soft, slow, certain. Good night, from me, from Charles, and from the quiet world we've built together. Across the river, beyond a few sleepy traffic lights that never turn red more than necessary, and past a bakery that never sells out because no one is ever in a rush, lived Mildred. Mildred was Charles's cousin. They hadn't spoken in years, not because anything was wrong. It just never felt urgent enough to interrupt the silence. Mildred was a curtain inspector. Yes, curtains. Every weekday, from 10:06 a.m. to 3:47 p.m., she would examine the stitching on mid-tier domestic drapes. Not the fancy kind, not blackout curtains, just the regular kind. The ones that billow a little in the wind and make soft whooshing sounds when you pass them gently with your hand. Mildred loved the word drape. She once said, "Drape sounds like a sigh," and then she sighed. She lived in a modest third-floor apartment with 7 houseplants, all named after punctuation marks. There was colon, comma, semi, def, hyphen, ellipses, and ampersand. Ampersand was a fern. It drooped, but Mildred said that made it seem more thoughtful. She watered her plants every Monday and Thursday, never Wednesday. Wednesday was for watching shadows on the wall. Her favorite plant was comma, a peace lily, because, as she once explained, a comma tells you to pause, but not to stop, and she liked that idea. Mildred didn't have a television. She had a fish tank, but no fish, just water. She liked the way the filter gurgled gently, like a small brook that had forgotten it was going anywhere. Sometimes, she'd sit and stare at the tank for 46 minutes. She once went for 47, but she sneezed, and it didn't feel right to count that. Her favorite sound in the world was the sound of a single sock falling onto a hardwood floor. Thup, that soft, weightless thud. A sound so minor, so non-committal, practically apologized for existing. She once recorded it. She plays it every night before bed. Just once. Thup, then silence, then sleep. Mildred drank exactly 1 cup of tea each day. 2:02 p.m. Chamomile in winter, peppermint in summer, and on precisely the spring equinox, she would brew a mix of both. She called it chambermint. No one else called it that, but no one corrected her. Her cups were always beige, not because she loved beige, but because beige never asked for attention. She had one friend, Mrs. Talbot. Mrs. Talbot was 89 and lived downstairs. They didn't talk often, but every Thursday, they'd meet in the stairwell and nod at each other. Just one slow, mutual nod. Sometimes that was all the human connection they needed for the week. Mildred kept her cutlery in a shoebox. not out of disorganization. She liked the idea of silverware feeling tucked in. She had 4 forks for knives and 3.5 spoons. One had a tiny chip on the edge. She still used it, especially on days when things felt slightly unpredictable. She would make oatmeal every morning, always plain, just oats, water, stirred exactly 32 times in a clockwise motion. Never stirred counterclockwise. She wasn't superstitious, but she said, counterclockwise feels like undoing the day before it begins. When the oatmeal was done, she'd let it sit for 5 minutes, not to cool, but to give it time to think. Then she'd eat it, 1 spoonful at a time, each bite placed slightly to the left of the previous one. A slow arc across the bowl that ended at the very bottom.
No leftovers. No crumbs.
Just a clean bowl and a quiet sense of victory. After breakfast, she would open the window, only a little, just enough to let in the scent of nothing, and the occasional breeze that smelled like dry sidewalks. She'd sit in her favorite chair, the one that squeaked a little if you leaned too far back. But she never did. She just sat, hands in her lap, listening to the rustle of leaves, and the occasional passing car that always seemed to be going somewhere slower. Sometimes, she'd read the instruction manual for her toaster, not because she needed it, but because she liked the way the font was laid out, and how each warning sounded both serious and sleepy at the same time. Do not insert metal objects. Do not operate near water. Do not toast while asleep. She highlighted that one. Felt ironic. She once tried journaling. Her first entry read, woke up, watered ampersand, thought about commas. Then she closed the journal and decided the rest could stay unwritten, because not all thoughts need witnesses. One Tuesday morning, Charles received a letter, not an email, not a phone call, just a letter. It had no urgency, no return address, just a plain white envelope, with his name handwritten in a script that felt like it was trying not to be noticed. He didn't open it right away. He placed it on the kitchen table, aligned it perfectly with the salt shaker, then made tea, decaf of course, and toast, 2 slices, lightly browned. After breakfast, he returned to the letter, picked it up, held it gently by the corners, opened it with a letter opener shaped like a sword. He liked the contrast, small drama in an otherwise drama-free world. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. On it, in careful, quiet handwriting, Dear Charles, I found an old photo of us at Aunt Myra's garden party. You were wearing socks with ducks on them. I remember thinking, he must be very sure of himself. Hope you're well. I'm still in town. Thursdays are good if you ever want to meet. No pressure. Just tea. Mildred. Charles read it once, then again, then folded it back the way it came, and placed it under the magnet shaped like a stapler on his fridge. He didn't decide right away. Decisions for Charles were like soup, best left to simmer. That Thursday, at exactly 4:03 p.m., he walked to the little cafe next to the hardware store that nobody ever went inside. Mildred was already there. Of course, she sat by the window, not facing it, just near it. She liked knowing light was available. Charles sat down. They didn't hug, didn't shake hands. They simply nodded. 2 slow nods, perfectly in sync. Then they ordered tea. No sugar, no milk, just tea. They didn't talk much. At one point, Mildred said, You still tuck in your shirt? And Charles replied, Yes. Silence. Then she smiled. Not wide, just enough to cause a ripple across her cheeks. It was a good meeting, exactly 47 minutes. They both stood, said well, and went their separate ways. Charles walked home feeling unchanged, yet slightly more placed. That evening he fed Gerald, adjusted his stapler by half an inch, and went to bed 3 minutes earlier than usual. Felt like a small rebellion, but a gentle one. Mildred returned to her apartment, watered ampersand, and played the sound of the falling sock. Twice, she dreamed of ducks wearing socks. Neither of them told anyone about the meeting, not because it was a secret, but because it didn't need to be shared. Not everything does. The following Thursday they met again. Same cafe, same table, different tea green this time. They spoke about curtains and paper clips and how satisfying it is when pens run out of ink exactly as the last line is finished. They both agreed. The best kind of pen is one that finishes when you do. After 3 meetings, they stopped counting and started bringing books, not to discuss, just to read quietly beside each other. One Thursday, Charles brought a jigsaw puzzle. It was a picture of beige wallpaper, 500 pieces. They finished the edges, then packed it away. That was enough for one day. Eventually, Mildred introduced Charles to her plants. He liked ellipses. She said he would. She also showed him the fish tank. He asked where the fish were. She said, "They're implied." Charles nodded. One day, she gave him the chipped spoon. He didn't ask why. He just said thank you. He used it every Saturday. For yogurt, strawberry, with no chunks. Chunkless yogurt, Charles believed, was the highest form of dairy. Weeks passed, or maybe months. Time for them was less a calendar, and more a quiet unfolding, like pages in a book they weren't in a hurry to finish. The seasons didn't change quickly in their town. They arrived like polite guests, never barging in, never overstaying. Just one day, you'd notice a leaf on the pavement and realize it had been fall for quite some time. Charles began taking evening walks, not far, just to the bench near the library, the one with the slight tilt that made you feel like you might slide off, but never actually did. He liked to watch the streetlights flicker on, not all at once, but in staggered little bursts, like stars deciding whether or not to show up. Sometimes Mildred joined him. They rarely spoke during these walks, but sometimes they'd hum the same melody, without planning to. One night, they watched a moth land on Charles's shoe. They stared at it for a full minute. Then Mildred said, "That moth has no idea we're here." Charles nodded. "That's probably for the best." And the moth flew away. Mildred had taken up knitting, but only scarves, and only beige ones, not because it was fashionable, but because it matched everything without ever demanding to be noticed. She gave one to Charles. He didn't say thank you. He just wore it. Every Thursday, they started having tea at each other's homes now. Alternating weeks, strict schedule, unspoken agreement. At Charles's place, they'd drink on the porch, watching Gerald nap near the broom. At Mildred's, they'd sit by the fish tank, staring at the nothing inside it. It was peaceful. It was enough. They didn't use the internet much. Mildred had a rotary phone. Charles once tried to Google the proper name for the smell after rain, but stopped halfway through the search. Some things he thought are better left unnamed. Once they played a game of Scrabble. Neither of them cared about winning, so they just built the board into one long chain of quiet words. Pause, still, drift, mute, sigh, blanket, fade, When they ran out of tiles, they both agreed that was the best game of Scrabble they'd ever played, even though neither of them remembered who scored what. Then came a Tuesday when Mildred didn't show up. No letter,
no knock.
no soft cough in the stairwell. Just Tuesday. Charles didn't panic. He waited. He understood Mildred well enough to know that absence was sometimes just a different kind of presence. The next day, there was a note at his door, folded once, written in her neat, whispery script. Dear Charles, I've gone to visit my sister. She has a new kettle. I felt I should see it. Back in a week. Feed ampersand if he droops. Love, Mildred. Charles placed the note beside the others, then went to water ampersand. Even though the fern wasn't drooping, he hummed to it softly, a single note, sustained. The week passed slowly, even for Charles. He reread old appliance manuals, polished his stapler, timed how long his tea took to cool without blowing on it. He missed Mildred in the quietest way possible. Not loudly, not achingly, just noticeably. She returned exactly 7 days later and handed him a coaster from her sister's house. Thought you'd like it, she said. It had a picture of a teacup on it, and the words, "Sip happens." Charles smiled. He placed it under the chipped spoon. Then they had tea, chamomile, in the morning, just because. They didn't mention the trip again. Some things are meant to be left behind gently, and gently, life continued. The last Thursday of that year was much like all the others. The air smelled faintly of paper and rain, the kind of scent that feels like it belongs in a memory, even if you don't know which one. Charles arrived at the cafe first. He ordered tea, jasmine this time. They were trying new things, in the least exciting way possible. Mildred arrived 7 minutes later. Not early, not late, just Mildred. She was wearing a cardigan that looked like it had been knitted by silence itself. They sat by the window again, not to watch the street, but just to sit where the light could find them. Charles placed a pebble on the table. I found this near the library bench, he said. It looks like it's thinking about something. Mildred picked it up, turned it slowly in her fingers, and placed it beside her cup. It's definitely contemplating something important, she said. Probably soup. They nodded. They drank their tea slowly. No words for a while, just warmth, and the soft clinking of ceramic against ceramic. Outside, the clouds were moving like they'd forgotten where they were going, and had decided to just float. Charles finally said, I like this. Mildred didn't ask what he meant. She just said, so do I. A silence followed. Not an awkward one. Not the kind that begs to be filled, but the kind that lets you breathe deeper, like someone's removed a weight you didn't know you were carrying. They left the cafe just before it got dark, walked in the same direction, at the same slow pace. Their steps weren't perfectly matched, but close enough. At the corner, they paused. Mildred said, next Thursday. Charles replied, of course. And that was it. No grand farewell. No moment of sudden realization. Just a simple agreement to keep showing up. And sometimes, that's all life needs. Charles walked home, fed Gerald, flipped his pillow to the cooler side, turned on his bedside lamp, which gave off the perfect hue of not quite yellow. He didn't feel old, or young, or anything in particular. He just felt placed, like the last puzzle piece, even if the picture didn't quite make sense. Mildred returned to her apartment, watered her plants. Ampersand had grown a new little shoot. She named it parenthesis. She put on her softest socks, the ones that never stay up, but never fall completely. Then she lay down, not because she was tired, but because it was time. She looked at the ceiling, which had a tiny crack shaped like the letter Y. She closed her eyes and let the silence do the rest. Outside, the town turned its lights down. The moths danced around the dimmest bulb. The breeze checked the locks on every window, and the world, without fuss, gently went to sleep. If you've made it this far, chances are your eyelids are heavy, your breath is slow, and the noise of the day has slipped out the back door. Before you drift off completely, let us know where you're watching from. Just drop your country in the comments. And if this video helped you rest, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another journey like this one. More stories, more silences, more moments that don't rush. Good night from Charles, from Mildred, from Gerald, from ampersand and parenthesis, and from the quietest corners of your own mind.